This session is really inspired on behalf of a project rollout by the IBA. It's a global initiative to encourage countries to use and implement non-trial resolutions. As one of the key hallmarks, the recent OECD recommendations and a new element to the recommendations. And I think, as John said, particularly timely. But I think the OECD recommendations contain many elements to it that are very much topical to South Africa at the moment, to what's being constantly debated in the press by any anti-corruption practitioners, and of course emanating largely from what we've seen come out of the Zondo Commission and the recommendations contained therein. I think there's also, the OECD recommendations, which we'll unpack, are also very much principle-based. It's really up to the countries to decide how best to implement those measures as effectively as possible. And I think, importantly, and the one message we really wanted to get across on today's session is the role of the private sector in this. A lot of the policies, the tools and mechanisms that are to be used in pursuit of the OECD recommendations require not only buy-in from the private sector, but input. A lot of the policies are designed to ultimately detect and deter wrongdoing within private sector. And it's not just the responsibility of the public sector and government to implement these recommendations, but I think it goes very much hand in hand with the private sector. And I think for that reason, it's fantastic to have a panel, unfortunately not all here in person, but certainly that's so engaged in this topic, so diverse. To have the minister on board is fantastic, but also top judicial minds, very experienced heads, and great to have business here as well. All the recommendations certainly talk about deferred prosecution agreements as one form of non-trial resolutions, and underpinning that is the use of sort of restorative justice. It's one of the constitutional, or one of the principles enshrined in our constitution, allowing companies and firms to come forward, be transparent, be cooperative, and be forthcoming. So there's certainly a good principle foundation for that. Jennifer, I think you've already flagged what would probably be most people's concern with non-trial resolutions is, can it be used as an opportunity for firms to really sort of the get out of jail free card? Is it going to be enough of a deterrent to ensure that the company itself doesn't engage in continuous wrongdoing, but also send a strong enough message to other companies out there? And I think there's a number of facets to it. There seems to be a couple of mutually reinforcing elements to it as well. One being particularly in the context of South Africa, where we know resource and capacity constraints are high, where the prosecuting authorities are emboldened by concluding successful non-trial resolution, non-settlements, actually getting funds back, and can actually then focus not only their time and efforts, but also the resources in going after those firms who are either not being cooperative or are not willing to engage in these types of processes. That certainly lengthens the stick, so to speak, as well as incentivizes the carrot. And I think that was your opening remark, Jennifer, that you need to have both the carrot and the stick system for any non-trial resolution mechanism to work. Companies need to know that the alternative of not cooperating, not taking opportunity of being transparent, there is actually a downside and a backlash. I want to get the rest of the panelists' thoughts on this. I want to start with Willie and Professor Shorpe. I know both of you have, in our previous discussions leading up to the session, expressed some reservations, not necessarily being anti-non-trial resolution, but certainly some reservations and risks. And get your thoughts not only on what those are, but how best to possibly address those very much from a South African perspective. And I think just in saying that, we've obviously got guilty pleas in terms of the Criminal Procedure Act, one form of non-trial resolution mentioned, but the ability for the National Prosecuting Authority to conclude non-trial resolutions, possibly even before pressing criminal charges, would of course be an important thing to debate as well. I think there is a less unanimous view in terms of what and how the whistleblowing regime should be bolstered in South Africa. Is it US model where whistleblowers are potentially rewarded with, millions of dollars of compensation, a reward, a bounty, if you like, for disclosing wrongdoing? Or is it a more nuanced approach where you just, compensate a whistleblower for loss of income, for any other damages suffered, for coming forward? Whistleblowers, and I think certainly the US colleagues who are far more familiar with it from a United States perspective will confirm that the data is that suggests that the vast majority of whistleblowers try and report internally